I was saying, it definitely sets me up nicely for today's Powerhouse Mindset Bootcamp, which is really talking about judgment, because all of the judgment that we have going on is really impacting the way that we're living. It's impacting our happiness. It's impacting our ability to work. And hopefully, if you haven't seen the past few weeks that we've done Mindset Bootcamp, and we've talked a lot about the different mental skills that we need to be able to improve our life experience, which and then improves our performance. Go back, check them out, because a lot of what leads up to how do we handle both the judgment that we put onto the world and to our children and our co-workers, our family, and then even more importantly, how do we manage and deal with the judgments that we put on ourselves, which really I like to call is a self-attack. And so we're going to talk a little bit. I'm going to share my screen with you so you guys can, let's see, just if you could do me a favor and put in the chat whether or not you can see my screen, that would be amazing. So I'm sharing the right screen. Okay, awesome. Thank you, Carrie. All right, perfect. So what is judgment? What are judgments, right? And so there are 4 characteristics that I really like to talk about throughout this presentation. One is that judgment colors our reality. It's our lens in which we see the world. It strengthens duality, and duality is good, bad, right, or wrong. It limits our reality, so the reality that we see becomes enclosed in this small little box. And then lastly, it creates conflict. So those are the 4 things that I wanted to kind of walk through with you guys today and do a little bit of an exercise so we can learn how to deal with judgment in a different way, because judgment isn't bad at all. Judgment is actually a very important part of what makes us human and which keeps us safe, right? If we're walking down the street and it's dark and we see somebody who it looks a little bit shady, our judgment of that helps us be safe. It helps us maybe walk on the other side of the street. So to a degree, we need that part of our mind or part of our brain, but we need to keep it in check. And so, oops, let's go here. So with that, let's talk about the first component of judgment, which is a lens. It's basically, judgment operates as a lens. It's how we see the world. It's how we view things that are happening. And each of us, based on our beliefs and what's happened to us in our life, we have a different lens in which we see the world. And again, recognizing what that lens is incredibly important. And so with that, I want to show you how that works. So this is you, this is me, right? And all these little dots here are our belief system. It's how we, based on our experience growing up, it's how we learned what the world looks like. It's our beliefs, it's our norms. And then between reality, we have this lens of judgment, and each of us will see life very differently based on what our experiences are, right? And that brings reality. And so the goal today and the goal in life is really, how do we take away that lens so that we can see reality more clearly? So let's give you a few examples of this. So one lens might be, you believe that it's important to have a high salary, and having a high salary equals success. That's your belief system. That's how you see the world. And so when you're seeing the world this way, you might look at a person who makes a low salary, but they spend a lot of time with their kids because that's what's important. You might look at that and say, oh my goodness, he plays a judgment. That guy's a loser. He's not successful at all. And I see this a lot. I worked in Wall Street for 20 years, and the big problem so often is this judgment around Wall Streeters thinking that money is the most important thing, and that people who don't have that belief system, you know, they're losers, or they're not at where I want. Then you have to understand that the people who aren't who value family, to them, the Wall Streeter who all he cares about is making more money is the loser, because they're actually spending time with their family. And my point is not to say one is right or wrong, but that they both can exist at the same time, and it just depends on what's important to you. And so to look at that judgment as a judgment and look at your reality as what it is, which is, if the financial means is what's important, then that's okay for you. It doesn't mean that somebody else is a loser because they don't, right? And then we have this other belief system where somebody believes that family equals success, like I talked about, and that people with a low salary, they get to spend a lot of time with their family, and to them, they're winners. And so this is this difference, between, like, how do we place our judgments? And then lastly, I wanted to bring this up because I find that, I want to tell you a little story about a client of mine The belief is crying is a sign of weakness. And I had a client once that came to me, and her father had passed away, and she never mourned that experience. And so it had been a couple of years, and she was coming to me because she just felt something, this anxiety, this stress around her father's death. And we got into it. She's like, you know, I never cried because my dad growing up, that was not what people do. You handle your emotions, you suppress your emotions. And so she's been spending, you know, her whole life, and especially these past couple of years after the death of her father, suppressing this emotion, that crying and is weakness, showing emotion is weakness. And something that we've, you know, talked about in the other sessions is suppression is a terrible thing, because it's similar. I give this an analogy of, imagine you're in a lake and you're sitting on a beach ball and you're pushing that ball deep into the water, and then it just pops up. And the deeper you push it, the higher it pops up. And I like to say emotions are the same way when we suppress them. And so having this, being aware of this belief system and how that belief system is affecting, you know, the situation, the reality is we're crying, or we're having this emotion because we're feeling pain. That's the situation, that's the reality. And the judgment we place on ourselves is, I am weak. And I'm just trying to help you understand that when we become aware of the belief that's impacting the judgment, we're able to have more control over that judgment to begin with. The very interesting way to handle this, if you think about something that you judge often, and then ask yourself, you know, who or what am I judging often? And then think about, how does that judgment make you feel? And I would guess that most times when you really think about a judgment that you had, it's probably not making you feel so good. And so it gives you this moment where you can look at the judgment in a different way, so that you can put the lens in a more realistic sense. What is this really all about, right? And so this brings me to an important note, that oftentimes judgment says more about the person who's making the judgment than the judgment that's being made to begin with. Oftentimes how we are judging ourselves is how we judge others. And is that fair? And so once we can start to see how we're judging, then we can start to look at a lens of other people in a little bit of a different way. And a good tool to do this, something that I work on with my clients, we like to talk about how do we start recognizing judgment. And there's something that you can create called the Judgment Journal. And I encourage you to do this. I encourage you just to take 1 week and have a journal with you. And every time you have a judgment, oh, that girl's dress is ugly, or oh, I didn't do this right. Judgments on yourselves and judgments on others. Take a week and create a judgment journal. And at the end of the week, look at that journal and start to see what themes start showing up. Is it that you're judging others way more than you're judging yourself, right? Or is it that you're judging others, or are you judging yourself more than you're judging others? So it's important to really figure out, what are you judging? And then start to ask yourself this question, you know, why am I making these judgments? What is it about me that makes me judge these things as right or wrong? Because when there's a place of less judgment, there's a lot more happiness. It's imagine you have a tank filled with water, and every time you judge, the tank gets less and less and less. And that tank that's full is your happiness. And every time we judge, it gets less. And so when we can learn to stop judging as good or bad and seeing more as what it is, we can keep our tank much fuller than when we're constantly judging. And the judgment, especially us as women and as mothers, this is a Powerhouse Working Mom Summit, so it's important to bring it up. As women, we tend to judge ourselves a lot. Are we doing enough for our kids? Are we doing enough for work? I mean, if you want to put in the chat, how many of you feel like judgment right now is really coming full force because we are spread so thin? If you resonate with this, like, definitely please put in the chat. Like, we're spread so thin that we're constantly looking at our performance and judging whether or not it's good enough. I judge myself harder than anyone could ever possibly judge me. Yes, exactly. Me too. And I think that's what you'll find if you guys do a judgment journal, what you'll find is that that's actually absolutely true. The judgment ratio between ourselves and others, in most cases that I've seen, it comes out that we're judging ourselves a lot more than we're judging others. But the important thing to know is that when we judge ourselves, we subconsciously are judging people through a lens that isn't really fair. It's not them, it's more us than it is them. So now let's talk about the next characteristic of judgment, which is this idea of duality, which is, it's the core of judgment. Duality is this sense that if one is right, then the other must be wrong, right? The opposites only exist in relation to each other. So I can say someone's pretty because I can say someone else is ugly, right? But I want you to do this exercise. Imagine that you were the only person on this planet, in this whole universe. Would you be little or would you be tall? Oops. Would you be good or would you be bad? Now remember, you're the only person in the planet. And so when you think about this, opposites can only exist in relationship to one another, right? So nothing could be good if there was nothing wrong. And so if you were the only person on this planet and you had nothing to judge yourself by, you wouldn't know what tall was or short was. And so the point of bringing this up is that when we bring judgment into our world, it strengthens this duality. It strengthens, you're either right or you're wrong. You're either good or you're bad. And I'm just saying, if you look at this, it's really the same coin. They're not different, right? Who in this planet has ever had success without failure? And how much better does success feel when we've had some failures? I like this analogy of the game, like the Mario Brothers. I'm not sure if any of you guys have ever played Mario Brothers, or maybe your kids do, or any video game really. And you think about, what if you play this video game and if the levels were super easy and you just got through them really quickly and there was no challenge? Like right now, you play Mario Brothers, you get for the first level, you have to play it a few times, you get better at it, then you move to the next level. So you're failing a lot, right? You're failing a lot so that you can get to that next level. Well, life is actually kind of similar to that, in that we're constantly doing new things and need to fail in order to have success. So failure is not alone and success is not alone. They're in the same coin, right? And it's the same thing when we think about leisure time and work time. We're constantly, as working mothers, trying to find this work-life balance. It's what we all strive for, right? And we only think that there's needs balance because we have two opposite things. We have work and we have life. But really, do we need one or the other? Or can we just find a way to have them coexist? And we had a conversation with Lisa Brill in the beginning, and she actually was the one who turned me on to this concept of, there is no such thing as work-life balance. It's unattainable. And so what we really need is this work-life integration. Let them be one thing. Let us figure out when, in this example, in this chart, you see them as 50-50, but really, sometimes it's going to be 60-40. Sometimes you'll have to put more time in work, and sometimes you have to put more time at home and life and leisure. The important thing is to not judge yourself when you're putting time in those different spaces, to really start to look at your time as something that is changeable. And so if you did a terrible job in your mind this week at being there for your children, don't judge yourself, because next week is a new week, right? We can always start over. And so this is the ideas of duality. And when we have judgment, we look at things as black and white. And I encourage us, when we start to lose judgment, we actually start to look at things as two things can coexist together. We can have a very successful career, and we could also be wonderful, attentive, present mothers. And so this is kind of the stuff that we talked about, and just really understanding that they don't have to be interdependent, they can be together. And so looking beyond judgment, we can experience things in a way that is more holistic and not good or bad. Okay, so the next characteristic is judgment limits reality. So reality is extremely complex. There's no question about that. But judging reduces reality by focusing on only one aspect of it. And so we're really start to put things in this small box, right? We're bad, or we're a loser, or we're a failure. But when we can start to look at reality as what it is, we can start to put ourselves into a much bigger universe where we're not so limited by these judgments of ourselves and these thoughts. I think about, you know, think about something in your own life where, let's say, let me give you a good example. So I have decided that I'm going to go back to get my master's degree in mental health counseling. About 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, when I started getting my coaching certificate, I thought to myself, I had a judgment that going back to school would be very time consuming. I wouldn't be able to spend enough time with my kids. My judgment was, at my age, I'm 44 years old. Like, who goes back to school at 44 years old? Like, I had all these judgments around it. And so instead of going back to school to get my master's in mental health counseling, I decided to go and spend a year and get my certificate in executive coaching. And so that's what I did. And then I came back here, and I did that because I felt like I'm 40, you know, at that time, 41, 42, like I'm too old to go back to school. I won't have enough time. And so I made that choice. And here I am, you know, now 3 years later, and I'm looking at it and saying, that was kind of a silly decision, right? I love helping people. I love serving people. I want to have the credentials that enables me to do that at a much more complex level, which getting my licensing will help me do that. But my judgment kept me playing small. And so I'd love for you to think about your own life and say, where are my judgments keeping me playing small? And what is the reality? There are people who go back to school at 50 years old, that's the reality. Like, there's no truth in what the judgment is that I made. And it didn't hold me back, because I'm going to go now and I'm going to get it. And I'm going to have that experience, which I'm really excited about. But it could have been done already if I wouldn't have had that judgment. So that's how it limits our reality. So I want you to recall a painful event in your life, or a loss. And I want you to think about, what were the most negative consequences of that event? So just think about that for a moment. Recall a painful event or loss that you've experienced, and what was the most negative consequence of that event? Oops. Okay, now I want you to focus, now that we've done that, focus on the positive aspects and how the experiences has actually benefited you as a person. How it's made you better, how it's prepared you for other challenges. How have you grown, right? So oftentimes you have two people, they both lost their jobs, and now we are at a place where over 40 million people have lost their jobs. It breaks my heart to think where we are as a country right now. 45 million people have lost their jobs. Over 60% of those have been women, right? And now two people lose their jobs. One person says, okay, well, this is an opportunity for me to reevaluate. Think about, was I doing the things that was in line with my values to begin with? Was that where I should have been spending my time? And the other person goes into complete breakdown mode. Stress, anxiety, not able to get out of bed. But to the same situation. They happen to the same, let's just assume everything's the same. They both have the same amount of money. They both have the same family support. However, how they're perceiving that loss is completely different. And if you ask yourself in this, like a challenging or painful event, you lose your job, it attacks you as a person, you start to have all these self-doubts about why you. But when we judge that experience as good or bad, we lose sight of what is the opportunity here in this moment, right? Every negative has some positive aspect of it. And I'm not telling you, because I hate those people who go out there and say, oh, just think positive, it's all going to be okay. No, that's not what I'm saying. It's okay to feel scared. It's okay to feel anxiety. Embrace it. And then come out of it and say, okay, now what's next? How can I take what's happened to me and look at it in a way that I can grow from it? So don't push it aside. Don't stick it under the water like that beach ball. But how can I learn from it? Who can I reach out to? Who can I talk to start thinking about the next steps? So it's important to know that nothing is only good or bad, right? Everything contains two sides. And when you judge those sides as good or bad, there's this ignore the endless complexity of the situation. Okay, so the next one is judgment creates conflicts. So what does that look like? What I feel. Judgment is I'm feeling bad. And then we start to think, well, what should I feel? And there's the conflict. The conflict is, what am I feeling and what should I feel? And there's this judgment that's going on. Whatever that feeling is, there's this judgment about feeling. So instead of just allowing yourself to feel bad and embracing that and then thinking, what can I learn from it? We're just judging it. And so that we're in this kind of this loop, this conflict loop. I mean, so many people will tell me, well, I feel stressed, but then they feel stressed about feeling stress. How many of you have thought about that? Like, I'm stressed out, and then you're stressed about feeling stress, and what can you do about it? So the reason why you're stressed about feeling stress is because you're judging it as good or bad, and I'm just suggesting that there's another way. And so we talked in week 1, I really introduced to you guys one of Vision Pursue's key concepts, which is the C process. And I'm suggesting we apply C to that judgment. And for those of you who who missed that session, it's definitely worth going back and checking out. I talk about the 3 steps to managing difficult emotions and how to apply Vision Pursue's mental skills tools to handling difficult emotions. And so I'm going to just go over one more time with you briefly how to start applying VP's tools to judgment. And so let's use it. Let's see a judgment, something that we were all kind of experiencing or have been experiencing over the past few months as mothers. I'd say the judgment of a really failing, I'm speaking for myself, I'm really failing as a mother right now as far as keeping my kids where they need to be academically. So this whole summit came up for me, and it was really important to dedicate a month to providing this support to other working moms. And that came at a price. It came at a price in that because I took on this big venture, it meant I didn't have as much time to be there for my kids and to help get them onto all their classes and get them making sure they're doing all their work. And that came at a price. And so there was definitely a lot of judgment around how I was showing up as a mom during this time. And so let's apply the big three. And the first one was that we learned about was expect the expected, right? And so expect the expected really means let's look at reality for what it is. The reality is I'm not a bad mom. The reality is that I am making a choice right now to put effort into this summit so that I can be of service and help other working mothers. But it makes sense that I'm going to feel this way because I love my kids and I pride myself in being a good mother. So expect the expected is it makes sense that I'm going to be feeling this way because one of my core values is being a good mom and being present and being there. And that core value is going to have to take a little bit for the period of a month, it's going to have to go back seat, and that's okay, right? And so I'm expecting to feel that way. And now I'm going to apply C to the judgment. C means to separate. S is to separate from the emotion and become an observer of it, right? And look at it as I'm feeling like a bad mother versus what we tend to say, our self-talk, right, is I'm such a bad mom, I'm a terrible mom, I am, versus I'm feeling like a bad mother right now because it's going against one of my core values. And then E is embrace. Embrace is to thank that emotion for showing up for me. It's there to keep me safe, and it's there to keep me to do something, right? To be present when I can. So thank the emotion for showing up instead of resisting it. Be like, yeah, it makes sense that I feel that way. And then evaluate. We're going to evaluate what it is that we can do. Can I show up differently? Maybe I can show up after 5 o'clock, I'm done with all the summit stuff. I can show up to them in a different way. And then the last thing that we learned in the first session in the second session was control the controllable. I can't control everything, yet we're trying to control everything. And so in this circumstance, what can I control? I've evaluated that it's important for me to do something, and what can I do? And so I made sure that I spent a heck of a lot more time engaged in trying to catch up on the work that we missed during the week. We did it on the weekends. That's what I can control. And then instead of judging myself for this is good or bad, I was able to just see the judgment by using C, separate, embrace, evaluate, and then make an action, do an action to make me feel better over the weekend. And so this is what, again, what we've been doing. We have all these thoughts. The dots are all our beliefs. Our beliefs are inherited. So many of our beliefs are inherited. They're not even our beliefs. So one thing you can do is start to say, is this really my belief? Does it go with my values? Or was this something that was inherited by my family, by my parents growing up? It's their belief. It's not my belief anymore, right? And so really start to ask yourself those questions. And that's why I encourage you to do the judgment journal. The judgment journal is great because it really helps you start to become aware of what it is you're judging. And so the goal, when you start to apply these mental skills that we're talking about, the vision pursues big three, expect the expected, see and control the controllable, you start to become much more aware of your judgments. And when you become aware of your judgments, you can see reality and judgment as two different things. They're not the same thing. And if you really start to become aware, you can start to almost like see judgment as like this, like as a laser beam. Here it comes, right? This is my brain, this is how it's working. It's starting to, I'm not being there for my kids. And instead of judging, you can learn by applying C to embrace that judgment and see it for what it is. Okay, so the idea is to go from this picture, which is how we see the world, to this picture, right? Let's cut out that, or make that lens more clear. And we make the lens more clear by really start becoming aware of how we're seeing the world currently. And that's what we got, guys. So I'm hoping that this was helpful to you. There's so much more that we can go into as far as how do you address judgment. And unfortunately, we only have 30 minutes today, but I want to give you another way that you could start. Judgment really, if you've seen the past few sessions of Mindset Bootcamp, you'll notice that it's all surrounding the same theme. How do we bring awareness to our emotions? And then how do we apply mental skills to look at the emotions with a clear lens and without all this judgment? And when you start to apply these tools and you start to apply these mental skills, it's kind of like the same thing if you were going to go work out every day and you're like working to train on a marathon, your body gets stronger and stronger. What's the same thing as well, how our mental processing works. So we have to, in order to start changing the way we process information, how do we stop doing the negative self-talk? How do we stop judging all of ourselves and others? How do we start living a life that is much more in line with our values? You have to do the work. And this is our last Mindset Monday Bootcamp, which breaks my heart because there's so much more to share with you guys. But I encourage you, if you haven't already gone on the path of self-discovery, it's an amazing journey, and when you do the mental skills, you become so much more capable of managing your emotions. And life is pretty stressful right now. There's a lot of uncertainty, and when you apply these skills and these tools, you start to look at the world through a different lens, which is much more enjoyable. And so what I want to offer you for taking part in this summit, as part of Vision Pursue, we are a mental skills training organization. We work with professional athletes, large corporations, individuals, and I want to offer you guys an opportunity to get the app for free. So typically the app comes along with now it's remote training, it used to be in-person training, but I want to give this to you for free because I feel like even without the training, just going through the app, you'll be able to really start to learn some of these concepts and start applying them right away. So every day you can go on the app, it gives you a message, an important concept for improving your mindset. Then it gives you some type of meditation or mindfulness exercise. So this will help you start to improve your focus and mental processing. We look at mindfulness as a way to improve results. And that's by improving your ability to focus on the things that you want to focus on versus all this mental mind chatter that tends to go on with so many of us. And then the last thing is it'll give you an action. So how do you put this training to work with activities in an intentional way? And you can go through this program. All you need to do is go on Vision Pursue, go into the App Store and find the Vision Pursue app. The access code to get the free access is Powerhouse. And then you can start applying these tools right away. And if you haven't looked at the past few sessions, please go back, take a look. It'll also really reinforce what you learn in the app. And so these are the 4 sessions that we covered in Mindset Monday Bootcamp. I really hope that you enjoyed them. Feel free to share the app with a loved one if you think that they need it. Mental health is something that we can't ignore. It's something that we have to look at for ourselves. And when we start applying these types of trainings to our own life, as mothers, we are able to pass that through example onto our children. So take a look. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at nen@michelson@visionpursue.com. I'm happy to give you some more information. If you wanted to just do a trial and bring this to your companies, I'm happy to talk about how you could do that too. I think so many companies are now focusing on mental skills and mental health, which is amazing. So thank you again for going on this wonderful journey with me. I appreciate you. We appreciate you.